My name is Juliet Crawford, and I'm 32 years old. Last spring, I stood outside a church in my jeans and sweater, watching through the glass doors as my younger sister Natalie walked down the aisle in a $10,000 gown. I wasn't invited. Not as a bridesmaid, not even as a guest. My parents made that crystal clear 3 months earlier, when my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "You'll make it about yourself like you always do." I raised Natalie from the time she was 12. I gave up my college fund so she could have private tutoring, and now I was watching her biggest day from the outside like a stranger. I didn't know then that being excluded from her wedding would be the least painful part of what was coming. Before we dive into this story, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments because this community spans the entire world, and I love seeing where everyone is tuning in from. And if you believe that family should be about love and not just blood, go ahead and hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you haven't already because we share real stories about real struggles here, and trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Now let me take you back to where it all started, to a family that looked perfect on the outside but was rotting from within. Growing up in the Crawford household meant living in two completely different realities depending on which daughter you were. My father, Richard Crawford, built a real estate empire in our Connecticut town. My mother, Diane Crawford, had been a socialite before marriage and never quite let go of the need to control every narrative, every image, every perception of our family. And then there were the daughters. Natalie, who was 28 and could do no wrong, and me, who at 32 had somehow done nothing right my entire life. I was too emotional when I cried at my grandmother's funeral. I was too sensitive when I asked why Natalie got a car at 16 and Id had to take the bus. I was too dramatic when I pointed out that Id worked 2 jobs through high school while Natalie got an allowance that exceeded what I made in a month. The labels stuck to me like tar, and no matter how hard I tried to scrape them off, my parents just added more layers. When I was 16 years old, my mother had what she called a health crisis. To this day, I'm not entirely sure what was real and what was exaggerated because Diane had a gift for performing illness when it served her needs, but at the time, I believed every word. Natalie was only 12, and suddenly I became her primary caretaker. I gave up the theater club I loved because someone needed to pick Natalie up from school. I stopped seeing my friends on weekends because Natalie needed help with homework. I declined a scholarship opportunity to a summer arts program 2 states away because my mother clutched her chest and said, "I can't believe you'd abandon this family when we need you most." So I stayed. I worked at a coffee shop and a retail store, splitting shifts around high school classes, funneling money into the household account because Dad said business was slow and we all needed to pitch in. Later, I found out business was fine. They were just saving for Natalie's future. By the time I graduated high school, I'd saved $4,000 for college. It wasn't much, but it was mine, earned in $5 tips and minimum wage paychecks. 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave for community college, my father sat me down at the kitchen table. "Natalie needs a tutor," he said, staring at his hands instead of my face. "Her grades are slipping, and if she doesn't get into a good university, it'll reflect poorly on this family. Your mother and I think it's best if you contribute your savings toward her education. You can go to college later, you're already 18. Natalie's future can't wait." I remember the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears, a dull thudding that drowned out everything else. I said no. I actually said no for the first time in my life, and my mother, who had been standing in the doorway, stepped into the room with tears streaming down her face. "After everything we've done for you," she whispered, and I caved like I always did. Natalie got her tutor. She got straight A's. She got into an expensive private university where she studied abroad in Italy and France, while I took night classes at the local community college and kept working those same 2 jobs. Natalie never thanked me, not once. She treated me like hired help, calling me when she needed rides or money or someone to cover for her when she stayed out past curfew. And my parents praised her independence, her drive, her natural intelligence. Meanwhile, every time I asked for help with textbooks or mentioned I was tired, my mother would sigh and say, "You're so needy, Juliet. Why can't you be more like your sister?" The pattern was so deeply established that I didn't even recognize it as abuse. I thought I was the problem. I thought if I just tried harder, gave more, loved better, they would finally see me the way they saw Natalie. Then came the wedding announcement. It was a Sunday dinner 3 months before Natalie's big day, and she was glowing as she talked about the venue, the dress, the flowers. I sat there smiling, genuinely happy for her despite everything, already planning what I might wear as her bridesmaid. Then she said we're keeping it intimate, just close family and friends, and something about the way she avoided my eyes made my stomach drop. I waited for her to mention my role in the wedding. I waited through dessert. I waited until everyone started clearing plates. Finally, I asked, "So when do you want to go bridesmaid dress shopping?" The table went silent. My mother set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. "Natalie doesn't want any drama at her wedding," Diane said, her voice smooth as ice. "You have a tendency to make things about yourself, and we've all agreed it's best if you sit this one out." I looked at my father, waiting for him to defend me, to say this was ridiculous. Instead, Richard nodded slowly and said, "Your mother's right. You always find a way to make things about you. Every birthday, every holiday, there's some crisis or emotional outburst. Natalie deserves one day that's just about her." I couldn't breathe. I looked at Natalie, my baby sister who Eid raised, and she was staring at her plate. "Say something," I wanted to scream. "Tell them this is crazy." But she didn't. She just sat there, silent, complicit. I left that dinner table without another word, and spent the next 2 weeks trying to fix something that had never been whole to begin with. I called Natalie every day for 14 days. Every call went to voicemail. I sent texts that turned from confused to pleading to angry and back to desperate. Finally, 2 weeks later, she responded with a single message. "Mom's right. You've always been jealous of me. This is my day and I don't want you there." I tried to visit my parents' house and they wouldn't answer the door even though I could see them through the front window. I wrote a 5-page letter explaining everything Id sacrificed, everything Id given, begging them to understand that Id only ever wanted to be part of the family. The letter came back unopened, with "return to sender" written in my mother's perfect handwriting. That's when something inside me started to crack, a fissure that would eventually break wide open. But first, I had to live through the day itself. The day I stood outside that church like a ghost haunting my own family. The morning of Natalie's wedding, I told myself I wouldn't go. I'd stay home, maybe take a long drive, do anything except torture myself by being anywhere near that church. But by 10 in the morning I was pulling into the parking lot across the street, drawn by some pathetic hope that maybe if they saw me, if I was just present, they'd realize how cruel this all was. I wasn't dressed for a wedding. I wore jeans and an old sweater because I knew I wasn't going inside. I just wanted to see Natalie, to catch a glimpse of her happiness, even if I couldn't be part of it. So I stood on the sidewalk across from the church, partially hidden behind a maple tree, watching guests arrive in their elegant dresses and tailored suits. That's when my Uncle Bernard spotted me. He was my father's younger brother, always kind to me when I was growing up. The one who'd slip me $20 and say, "Get yourself something nice, kiddo." He crossed the street with a concerned expression, and for a moment I thought he was coming to invite me in, to fix this terrible mistake. "Juliet, sweetheart, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I just wanted to see her," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "I just wanted to see Natalie on her wedding day." His expression changed then, shifted from concern to something that looked almost like pity mixed with disgust. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" he said, and I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet. "Your parents told everyone what you did. How you threatened to ruin the wedding if you weren't made maid of honor. How you've been harassing Natalie for months." I stood there in complete shock because I had never, not once, threatened anything. I'd begged to be included, but I had never made threats. Bernard's face hardened in a way I'd never seen. "Look, Juliet, I don't know what's going on with you, but this is Natalie's day. Your parents are devastated by your behavior. The least you can do is leave before your father sees you out here and it causes a scene." He walked back across the street without waiting for a response, leaving me frozen on the sidewalk with the horrible realization that my parents had lied to everyone. They'd rewritten the story, made me the villain, protected themselves from any accountability. I wanted to scream the truth, but who would believe me? They'd already been told I was unstable, manipulative, jealous. I should have left then. Instead, I walked to the coffee shop on the corner, sat by the window, and ordered something I didn't drink. I watched the wedding party emerge for photos an hour later, Natalie looking absolutely radiant in a gown that probably cost more than my car. The dress was strapless with intricate beading that caught the sunlight, and her hair was swept up in an elegant style that made her look like a princess. My chest ached, with a complicated mix of love and loss. I took out my phone and snapped one picture. Just one. Because I wanted to remember that she'd been happy even if I hadn't been allowed to witness it up close. That single photo would later become evidence in a story I never intended to tell. But then my cousin Wesley, standing with the wedding party, spotted me through the coffee shop window. He pointed directly at me and yelled something I couldn't hear through the glass. The entire group turned to stare. Natalie's hand flew to her mouth. The groom, Preston, looked confused, asking questions no one answered. And my mother's face twisted into an expression of pure rage that I'd seen directed at me my entire life, but never quite so publicly. She marched across the street with my father trailing behind her, and I knew there was no escaping what was coming. The door of the coffee shop flew open and Diane descended on me like a storm. "How dare you stalk your own sister's wedding?" she hissed, loud enough for every customer to hear. Everyone turned to stare. The barista froze mid-pour. I tried to explain, my voice shaking so badly I could barely form words. "I wasn't stalking anyone," I said. "I just wanted to see her. I wasn't going to interrupt. I just wanted to see that she was happy." My father stepped forward, his face hard and cold. "You're an embarrassment to this family, Juliet. After everything we've given you, this is how you repay us? By harassing your sister on the most important day of her life?" His voice was loud, performative, designed to make sure everyone in that coffee shop heard his version of events. I looked past them to where Natalie stood on the church steps, her beautiful dress glowing in the afternoon sun. Our eyes met for just a moment, and I silently begged her to tell them the truth, to explain that I'd never threatened anything, that I'd only ever loved her. But she turned away, physically turned her back on me, and let her new husband guide her back toward the church. That rejection hurt worse than anything my parents had said. My mother leaned close, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for me. "You are no longer our daughter, do you understand? You don't exist to us anymore." Then she straightened, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue shed pulled from nowhere, and walked back across the street to applause from guests who thought she'd just bravely handled a crazy person. I sat in my car in that parking lot for over an hour afterward, sobbing so hard I thought I might break apart completely. My phone was clutched in my hand and I kept staring at that one photo of Natalie, trying to understand how we'd arrived at this moment. But somewhere in that hour, something shifted inside me. The desperate need for their approval started to die, replaced by something colder and clearer. I was done begging for love from people who were incapable of giving it. I was done believing their version of me. I drove home that day, not broken, but breaking free, though I didn't fully understand that yet. The real battle was still ahead, and it would require me to do something I'd never done before. Fight back. The 3 months following Natalie's wedding were the loneliest of my life, but also the most clarifying. I threw myself into my work as a graphic designer, taking extra projects and staying late at the office because going home meant sitting alone with thoughts that still felt too heavy to carry. But I also started therapy with Dr. Langston, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach to family dysfunction. She was the one who first used the term scapegoat, explaining how narcissistic family systems require one person to absorb all the blame, all the dysfunction, all the projected shame, so the others can maintain their false image of perfection. Hearing that I wasn't crazy, that this was a recognized pattern, felt like being given permission to breathe after holding my breath for 32 years. Dr. Langston encouraged me to go no contact with my entire family, at least temporarily, and the relief that followed that decision was staggering. I blocked their numbers, unfriended every family member on social media, and stopped checking to see if they'd reached out. They hadn't anyway. The silence from their end was deafening and telling. If I was truly the problem, wouldn't they be trying to fix things? Instead, they'd moved on without me as if I'd never existed, which told me everything I needed to know about my role in their lives. I'd been useful when I was giving, sacrificing, serving. The moment I needed something from them, I became disposable. Work became my refuge, and that's how I ended up at an art gallery on a Thursday evening in early fall. One of my clients was hosting an opening for a local artist, and Eid designed all the promotional materials, the posters and programs, and social media graphics. It almost skipped the event because I still wasn't comfortable in social situations, but my boss had insisted I attend and network. I was standing in front of a large abstract painting, genuinely trying to understand it, when someone next to me said, "I think it's supposed to be a sunset, but honestly it looks more like a pizza exploded." I turned to find a man about my age with warm brown eyes and the kind of smile that reached all the way to those eyes, crinkling the corners in a way that felt genuine. I laughed before I could stop myself, the sound surprising me because I hadn't laughed in months. "You designed these, didn't you?" he asked, holding up one of the promotional posters. "I'm Gabriel Fletcher. I'm the architect who designed this gallery space, so I guess we both contributed to tonight." I nodded, suddenly shy, but Gabriel had an easy way about him that made conversation feel natural rather than forced. We talked about design and architecture, about the connections between visual art and structural space, and then somehow we were talking about our families, and I found myself being more honest than I'd intended. He listened without judgment as I gave him the abbreviated version of the wedding exclusion, and when I finished, he didn't offer empty platitudes or try to explain away my family's behavior. Instead, he said, "That's not family, Juliet. Family is who shows up for you, not who shares your DNA." Those words lodged in my chest, a truth I was only beginning to understand. We exchanged numbers before leaving that night, and when he texted me the next morning asking if I wanted to grab coffee, I said yes before fear could talk me out of it. Our relationship unfolded with an ease that felt almost suspicious because I was so used to relationships being complicated and painful. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant where we talked for 4 hours straight, the kind of conversation that flows without effort or awkward silences. Gabriel came from a large, warm family, the complete opposite of mine, and he spoke about his parents and siblings with genuine affection that wasn't performed. He asked about my work, my interests, the things I like to do just for fun, and I realized no one in my family had ever asked me those questions. On our second date, he cooked dinner at his apartment, and his dog Murphy, a golden retriever with too much energy, immediately decided I was his new best friend. Gabriel laughed as Murphy tried to climb into my lap. "I think he has good taste," he said. And something about the casualness of the moment, the normalcy of just being in someone's presence without walking on eggshells, made me feel safer than I had in years. By our third date, I felt brave enough to tell him the full story. We were sitting on his couch after dinner, Murphy asleep at our feet, and I walked him through every detail of the wedding exclusion, the public confrontation, the realization that my family had made me the scapegoat my entire life. I was terrified think I was damaged or dramatic, all the labels my family had stuck on me. Instead, Gabriel's reaction was anger on my behalf, a protective fury that he wasn't trying to hide. "That's abuse, Juliet," he said quietly. "What they did to you is emotional abuse, and you deserved so much better." He didn't try to fix me or solve my problems. He just sat with me in the pain of it, and that presence meant more than any solution could have. Over the next 6 months, Gabriel became my safe place in a world that had felt hostile for so long. He introduced me to his family and they welcomed me with open arms, no suspicion or judgment or tests to pass. His sister Heidi became a genuine friend. His parents treated me like I mattered, and slowly I started to understand what healthy family dynamics looked like. I also started to heal in other ways. I took painting classes just for fun, something I'd loved as a kid but abandoned when there was no time and no encouragement. I made new friends through the classes, people who knew nothing about my family and saw me as I actually was, rather than through the distorted lens my parents had created. My career flourished too. I got promoted to senior designer, landed major clients, received recognition for work that had been doing in the shadows for years. Then one evening in early spring, almost exactly a year after Natalie's wedding, Gabriel took me back to the art gallery where we'd met. We walked through the space hand in hand, looking at a new exhibition, and then he stopped in front of a wall displaying some of my design work that the gallery had framed. I'd forgotten they'd asked to keep some pieces for their permanent collection. "Juliet," he said, turning to face me, "you're the artist of your own life now. You've painted over all the darkness they tried to cover you with and created something beautiful." Will you let me be part of your masterpiece? He got down on one knee right there, pulling out a simple but elegant ring, and I started crying before he could even finish the question. Yes, I said through tears. Yes, absolutely yes. We called his family that night and they erupted in celebration, his mother Dorothy crying happy tears and his father already talking about where we'd hold the ceremony. For the first time in my life, I was part of a real celebration where I wasn't expected to serve or sacrifice or shrink myself. I was just loved, fully and unconditionally, and as Gabriel held me that night, I realized something profound. My family's rejection had felt like the end of the world, but actually it had been the beginning of my real life. They'd let me go and I'd found something infinitely better. I'd found myself. Planning our wedding felt like an act of reclamation. Gabriel and I decided to keep it small and intimate, 50 people maximum, everyone there, because they genuinely cared about us rather than obligation or appearance. We chose a charming barn venue upstate, the kind of place that was beautiful in its simplicity, with exposed wooden beams and string lights and fields that went on forever. The venue cost a fraction of what Natalie's church wedding had cost, but it felt more authentic, more us. Since I was a designer, I handled all the visual elements myself, creating invitations that were simple and elegant, designing table settings and programs, and a welcome sign that made me proud of my own work. Everything was coming together beautifully, until Gabriel's cousin Meredith posted an engagement announcement on social media. She was excited for us, and meant well, tagging both Gabriel and me in a photo that showed my ring catching the sunlight. I'd never bothered to make my profile private because I'd blocked my entire family and assumed I was safe from their scrutiny. That assumption was my first mistake. The post started getting shared around our community, friends congratulating us, co-workers commenting with well wishes, and I felt happy seeing our joy reflected back to us. I didn't know my family was watching. 2 weeks after that innocent post, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered thinking it might be one of our vendors and instead heard the cold voice of my Aunt Ramona, my mother's sister who had always been neutral territory in family conflicts. Juliet, she said without preamble, your mother is absolutely heartbroken. I felt my stomach drop. About what? I asked carefully. Ramona's voice was sharp, accusatory. About the fact that you're getting married and didn't even tell your own family, that you're so vindictive you'd exclude your parents from one of the most important days of your life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They disowned me, I said, my voice rising. They told me I was no longer their daughter. They excluded me from Natalie's wedding and humiliated me publicly. I didn't cut them off, Ramona. They cut me off. There was a long pause. That's not the story Diane is telling, Ramona said quietly. She says you're the one who went no contact, that you cut them out of your life out of jealousy over Natalie's wedding. She's devastated, Juliet. And Natalie is beside herself that you're trying to overshadow her marriage by rushing into your own. The manipulation was so complete, so thorough, that I felt dizzy trying to explain reality to someone who had already been fed an alternate version. Ramona, I said carefully, I have text messages. I have documentation. They're lying. But Ramona had already made up her mind, already chosen to believe the version of events that painted Diane as the victim. I don't want to be in the middle of this, she said, but you should know that the whole family is talking about it. You're not coming off well. She hung up before I could respond. Over the next week, I started receiving messages from distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Cousin Felicity unfriended me on social media and sent a message that said, I can't believe you disrespect your parents like this. They raised you and this is how you repay them? Old family friends commented on my posts with passive-aggressive remarks about family values and honoring your parents. I realized with growing horror that Diane had launched a full smear campaign, rewriting history to make herself the abandoned mother and me the cruel, ungrateful daughter. She was turning people against me before I even knew there was a battle happening. Gabriel found me crying in our apartment after a particularly nasty message from a second cousin who called me selfish and spoiled. He read through the messages with increasing anger, then sat down next to me and said we're blocking every single one of them. You don't owe anyone an explanation, Juliet. These people don't know the truth and they don't want to know it. They want drama and gossip, don't give it to them. His sister, Heidi, who worked in public relations, came over that evening and helped me make all my social media profiles completely private. She also gave me advice I'd need later. If this escalates, she said, document everything. Screenshot every message, save every email. Truth is your best weapon, but only if you have proof. I tried to take their advice and focus on the wedding planning, on the joy of marrying someone who actually loved me. But there was an underlying anxiety I couldn't shake, a feeling that this was just the beginning. My family had successfully excluded me from Natalie's wedding and gotten away with it. They'd rewritten history, and everyone had believed them. What would they do now that I was threatening their narrative by building a happy life without them? I was about to find out, and their next attack would be far more calculated and destructive than I could have imagined. 2 months before the wedding, everything was confirmed and locked in. WED paid deposits to the florist, the caterer, the photographer, and the venue. I had spreadsheets tracking every detail, timelines for setup and breakdown, confirmations in writing from every vendor. I felt organized and prepared, cautiously optimistic that WED pulled off planning a beautiful wedding despite the undercurrent of family drama. That optimism shattered on a Tuesday morning when my phone rang at 8 in the morning. "Miss Crawford," the florist said, her voice professional but confused. "I need to discuss the cancellation fee for your October 15th order." I was making coffee when she called and nearly dropped the mug. "What cancellation?" I said, my heart starting to race. "I didn't cancel anything." There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "Your mother called yesterday afternoon," the florist said slowly. "She said the wedding was off, that you'd had a change of heart but were too emotional to make the calls yourself. She knew all the details, Miss Crawford. The date, the color scheme, the specific flowers you'd chosen. She said she was calling on your behalf to cancel everything." I felt the room spin. My mother had called my vendors. My mother, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year, who'd told me I was no longer her daughter, had somehow gotten all my wedding information and was actively sabotaging the event. "I'm so sorry," I told the florist, trying to keep my voice steady. "The wedding is absolutely not cancelled. My mother is not involved in this wedding in any capacity. She had no right to call you." The florist was sympathetic but clearly uncomfortable. "She seemed very legitimate," she said carefully. "She knew everything about your order." I assured her she'd receive payment as planned and hung up with shaking hands. That was just the first call. Within hours, the caterer called with the same story. "Your mother said you'd had a nervous breakdown and the wedding was postponed indefinitely." Then the photographer. Then, horrifyingly, the venue itself called. "Your father came by in person yesterday," the venue manager Francine said, and my blood turned to ice. "He was here for over an hour, Miss Crawford. He said he was paying for the wedding and needed to cancel due to your mental health issues." He even cried. He was very convincing. Gabriel came home from work to find me in the middle of a complete panic attack, surrounded by vendor contracts and my phone ringing non-stop. He immediately took over, calling vendors back while I tried to breathe through the terror. We spent the entire day doing damage control, proving our identities, showing email trails, explaining that my parents were estranged and had no authority to make decisions about our wedding. Most vendors were understanding once they saw the documentation, but some remained wary. Our photographer actually dropped out entirely, saying, "I don't want to be involved in family drama," and we lost the $1,200 deposit. The caterer agreed to stay on but increased the price by $500 for what he called the confusion and wasted time reassessing the event. The worst part was that we had to drive 3 hours upstate to meet with Francine in person because she understandably needed reassurance that we were legitimate and not the unstable people my parents had described. When we arrived at the venue the next day, Francine pulled up security footage from the day my father had visited. There he was on the screen, Richard Crawford in his expensive suit, sitting in Francine's office looking devastated. I couldn't hear the audio, but I could see him wiping his eyes, showing her old family photos on his phone, playing the role of concerned father perfectly. "Had brought documentation," Francine explained, "old pictures that proved he was your father. He said you'd been diagnosed with severe mental illness and weren't in touch with reality. He said the family was trying to protect you from making decisions you'd regret." I watched my father's performance on that security footage and felt something inside me turn to steel. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This was calculated, premeditated destruction. They'd researched my vendors, gotten detailed information somehow, coordinated their attacks to cause maximum damage. My mother had called multiple vendors in one day. My father had driven 3 hours to appear in person and tell elaborate lies. This was a campaign, organized and intentional, designed to destroy my wedding and my reputation in one sweep. We left the venue with Francine's assurance that everything was secure, but only after implementing a password system. Any changes to our booking would require a password that only Gabriel and I knew. We did the same with our remaining vendors, creating unique passwords for each one. Gabriel's lawyer friend helped us draft a cease and desist letter that we sent via certified mail to both my parents, legally demanding they stop interfering with our wedding planning. I thought maybe, possibly, that would be the end of it. I was wrong. They weren't done. Not even close. 1 month before the wedding, I walked into work on a Monday morning feeling almost optimistic. WED recovered from the vendor sabotage, found a new photographer who was even better than the first, and tightened security around every aspect of the wedding. I'd convinced myself that the cease and desist letter had scared my parents into backing off. That delusion lasted exactly until 9:30, when my boss Mitchell called me into his office with an expression I couldn't read. "Juliet," he said, closing the door behind me, "we received a concerning phone call this morning. Someone claiming to be your mother called our main line and asked to speak with HR." My stomach dropped. Mitchell continued, clearly uncomfortable. "She told our HR director that you're experiencing a mental health crisis. She said you've been planning a wedding that doesn't actually exist, and that the family is very worried about you. She even knew the names of projects you're working on. She suggested we do a welfare check and consider whether you're fit to handle client accounts right now." I sat there in complete shock, unable to form words. Mitchell leaned forward. "Juliet, I need to know what's going on. Is there any truth to what she said?" I felt humiliation wash over me in waves. I had to defend my sanity to my boss, had to prove that I was actually getting married, had to explain that my own mother was so committed to destroying me that she'd attack my career. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and showed him everything. Engagement photos, the venue contract, vendor confirmations, even the cease and desist letter WED sent. Mitchell's expression shifted from concern to anger as he realized what was happening. "I believe you," he said finally. "But Juliet, this is a problem. We can't have personal drama bleeding into the workplace. 2 of our clients have already heard rumors and requested different designers." I felt the bottom drop out of my world. My parents weren't just trying to ruin my wedding. They were trying to destroy my entire life, my career, my reputation, everything I'd built. Mitchell assured me I wasn't being fired, but warned me that if this continued, the company would have to take action. I left his office feeling like I was drowning. Like, no matter how far I ran from my family, they'd find new ways to drag me under. But the workplace attack was just the opening move. That same afternoon, I started getting screenshots from friends. Natalie had posted on Facebook a long, carefully worded message that didn't mention my name but made the target crystal clear. "It's heartbreaking when family members choose bitterness over love," she'd written. "When they can't be happy for your joy, and instead create drama and chaos. I'm learning that some people will always play the victim in every story, even when they're the ones causing pain. I pray for those who've lost their way and hope they find peace." The post had hundreds of reactions, dozens of comments from family and friends offering Natalie support and sympathy. Then my mother posted, and her strategy was even more insidious. She shared an old photo of me as a child, maybe 7 years old, smiling in a backyard somewhere. The caption read, "Missing my daughter today, praying she finds peace and healing. A mother's love never ends, even when it's rejected." The post was a masterpiece of manipulation. Diane positioned herself as the heartbroken mother, loving and patient, while I was the troubled daughter who'd cruelly cut off her family. Within hours, the post was shared 50 times. Comments poured in. "You're such a strong woman, Diane. I don't know how you stay so gracious. Some children don't appreciate what they have until it's too late. Praying for your family." Extended family members I hadn't seen in years commented with prayer hands, emojis, and messages of support for my mother. Gabriel's sister Heidi showed me the posts because I'd blocked my family and couldn't see them directly. I sat on our couch reading through the comments and felt like I was watching my reputation being shredded in real time. Everyone believed them. Everyone thought I was the villain. My mother had successfully painted herself as the victim, and me as the disturbed, ungrateful daughter, and there was nothing I could do to defend myself without looking defensive. If I responded, I'd be the crazy one attacking her poor, suffering mother. If I stayed silent, their narrative became the only narrative. I nearly broke that night. I cried for hours, the kind of crying that feels like it might never stop, and Gabriel held me through all of it. When I finally had no tears left, he said something that changed everything. They're winning because you're silent. You've done nothing wrong, but they're controlling the story. Maybe it's time to tell your side. His sister Heidi, who'd been watching this unfold with increasing anger, agreed. I work in PR, she said. I know how public narratives work. Right now they've created a story where they're the victims. You need to counter that with the truth. But the truth felt too vulnerable, too exposing. I didn't want to air family drama publicly. I didn't want to be that person. Then I thought about my workplace, about clients requesting different designers because they'd heard I was unstable. I thought about vendors who'd believed my parents' lies. I thought about the wedding itself, and realized they wouldn't stop. They'd keep attacking until they destroyed everything I'd built. Staying silent wasn't protecting me, it was enabling them. So I made a decision that terrified me. I would tell my story, all of it, with documentation and proof, not for revenge, for protection, for freedom, for the truth. Because sometimes the only way to stop people from lying about you is to show the world who they really are. 3 weeks before the wedding, I spent every evening after work gathering evidence. I screenshot text messages from family members, saved emails from vendors confirming the sabotage attempts, scanned the cease and desist letter, and carefully organized everything chronologically. Gabriel and Heidi helped me write and rewrite my story, making sure it was factual without being vindictive, honest without being cruel. We went through 17 drafts, each one stripping away unnecessary emotion and leaving just the truth, stark and undeniable. My goal wasn't to destroy my family. It was simply to protect myself by showing what they'd been doing in the shadows. But before I could post anything, my family launched one final attack that was so bold, so public, that it forced my hand. Gabriel called me from work on a Wednesday afternoon, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Your parents are here, he said, at my office. They're in the lobby with Natalie and Preston claiming they need to stage an intervention. I grabbed my keys and drove to his office building, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. When I arrived, I found Richard and Diane sitting on a couch in the modern glass lobby, dressed conservatively like concerned parents. Natalie sat next to them, looking uncomfortable, and Preston just looked confused. Gabriel was standing with his boss, a man named Walter who looked extremely uncomfortable with the entire situation. I walked in and my mother immediately stood up, reaching toward me with tears already streaming down her face. Juliet, sweetheart, we're so worried about you, she said, her voice breaking perfectly. We had to come because you won't return our calls. We love you and we just want to help. It was such a convincing performance that I almost doubted my own memory of events. My father stood too, his face arranged in an expression of paternal concern. We know you're struggling, he said gently. We've talked to doctors about what you're going through and we want to get you help. Natalie was staring at her hands, clearly uncomfortable but not speaking up. Gabriel stepped forward. I told you to leave, he said, his voice hard. I'm giving you one more chance before I call security. Diana's face crumpled. See? She said to Walter. Gabriel's boss? See how she's turned him against us? We're her parents. We only want what's best for her. She pulled out her phone and showed Walter old family photos, the four of us looking happy at some long-ago Christmas. We used to be so close, Diane said, her voice thick with tears. Then she met him and everything changed. She won't talk to us, won't let us be part of her life. We're terrified she's making a terrible mistake with this rushed wedding. Richard joined in, addressing Walter directly. We've heard concerning things about Juliet's behavior at work. We're hoping you can help us convince her to get professional help before she does something she'll regret. The implication was clear. They were suggesting I was mentally unstable, that Gabriel was controlling me, that the wedding itself was a sign of my deteriorating mental health. And they were doing it in front of Gabriel's boss, trying to sabotage his career the way they'd tried to sabotage mine. Walter, to his credit, looked deeply uncomfortable but also skeptical. "With all due respect," he said carefully, "this seems like a family matter that shouldn't be handled in my office. I think you should leave." My father's expression hardened slightly. "We're just trying to reach our daughter," he said. But there was an edge to his voice now. The mask was slipping. Gabriel moved to stand next to me, his hand finding mine. "They're lying," he said to Walter. "They've been harassing us for months, trying to sabotage our wedding. We have legal documentation of their harassment. I have a cease and desist letter in my car if you need to see it." Diane started crying harder, turning to anyone who would listen. "You see? This is what we're dealing with. She's completely turned against her own family. We're being painted as monsters when all we've ever done is love her." But her performance was too much, too theatrical, and I saw Walter's expression shift from uncomfortable to suspicious. Security arrived then, called by Gabriel before I'd even gotten there, and escorted my parents out of the building. Diane was still crying as they left, still performing for anyone watching. Natalie followed without making eye contact with me. Preston looked back once, an apology in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. Gabriel's boss pulled him aside after they'd gone. I could see them talking, see Walter's concerned expression, and I knew the damage had been done. That night, Gabriel came home looking exhausted. Walter was understanding, he said, but he asked if maybe we should postpone the wedding until things calmed down. Hess worried about the disruption. I felt rage build in my chest, hot and clarifying. They were going to keep doing this. They'd keep attacking our jobs, our reputations, our lives, until we gave up or they succeeded in destroying us. Unless we stopped them first. That night, I finalized the post I'd been working on for weeks. Heidi came over and we crafted it together, making sure every word was defensible, every claim backed by evidence. I created a photo collage that included screenshots of the vendor cancellation attempts, a copy of the cease and desist letter with identifying information blurred, the photo I'd taken of Natalie's wedding from across the street, text messages from family members, and a side-by-side comparison of my mother's missing my daughter post with a timeline showing when they'd actually disowned me. The caption told the entire story, from being excluded from Natalie's wedding to the ongoing harassment of our wedding planning, the vendor sabotage, the workplace attacks, the social media character assassination. I ended the post with these words: "I'm sharing this not for sympathy but for documentation. This is what family scapegoating looks like. If you're experiencing this, you're not alone, you're not crazy, and you deserve better." My hands were shaking as I hit post, making my profile public again and adding hashtags that would help people find it. Then I closed my laptop and tried to sleep, having no idea that by morning, my entire life would change. The truth, it turned out, had been waiting for its moment. And that moment had finally arrived. I woke up Saturday morning to my phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. Still half asleep, I reached for it and saw notification after notification flooding my screen. Comments, shares, messages from people I'd never met. My post had been shared over 1,000 times overnight. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake, and started reading through the responses. The comments section was exploding with support. Stranger after stranger was sharing their own stories of family scapegoating, of narcissistic parents, of being excluded and blamed and gaslit. People were tagging friends who they thought needed to see it. Several of my vendors had commented to confirm the story. The florist wrote, "This is absolutely true." I received the cancellation call from her mother. Francine, the venue manager, commented, "I can verify that the father came to our venue in person to cancel this wedding. Everything she's saying is accurate." By Saturday afternoon, local wedding forums had picked up the post. By evening, it had been shared 10,000 times. TikTokers were making reaction videos, stitching screenshots of my post with commentary about toxic family dynamics. Psychology professionals were commenting about narcissistic family systems and scapegoat roles. Sunday morning, I woke to find the post had reached 100,000 shares. Local news outlets were requesting interviews. The post had 50,000 comments and counting. My phone had so many notifications I had to turn off the sound. The truth, it seemed, resonated with far more people than I'd ever imagined. The reaction from my family was swift and panicked. Friends screenshot things before they disappeared and sent them to me. Diane had tried to delete her missing my daughter post, but it was too late. Screenshots of it were everywhere, with people pointing out the timeline didn't match her victim narrative. Natalie made her profile completely private after her comments section filled with people questioning why she'd excluded her sister from her wedding. Extended family members who'd supported my mother in her original posts were now backpedaling furiously. Aunt Ramona called Sunday afternoon, her voice completely different from our last conversation. "Juliet, I owe you an enormous apology. I didn't know the whole story. I believed what Diane told me, and I was wrong. I should have listened to you." Cousin Felicity, who'd unfriended me with a nasty message, sent a friend request with a long apology. "I had no idea they were lying about everything. I'm so sorry I believed them without hearing your side. I should have known better." Uncle Bernard, who'd told me I couldn't help myself outside Natalie's wedding, commented on the viral post. "I'm deeply sorry I didn't believe you that day. You deserved better from all of us." Watching extended family publicly apologize was surreal, but it also felt hollow. They'd been so quick to believe the worst about me, so ready to side with my parents without question. Their apologies now felt more like reputation management than genuine remorse. My father tried damage control, posting his own response on Sunday evening. "This is a private family matter that's being exploited and manipulated. I'm disappointed that my daughter would air family business publicly rather than trying to work things out privately." But the internet wasn't buying it. His post got ratioed immediately, with negative comments far outnumbering any support. People found his real estate company's page and left reviews mentioning his behavior toward his daughter. His business started getting negative attention, professional associations questioning his character. He deleted the post within 3 hours, but screenshots lived forever. Monday morning, my boss Mitchell called me before I even got to the office. "Juliet, I saw your post over the weekend," he said, "and I heard about what happened at Gabriel's workplace. I owe you an apology. I should have trusted you immediately when your mother called. You've never given me reason to doubt your professionalism, and I let outside interference make me question you. I'm sorry." 2 clients who'd requested different designers after hearing rumors called to ask if they could come back. The photographer who'd dropped out left me a voicemail. "I made a terrible mistake. I was wrong to believe your parents without hearing your side. I'd be honored to shoot your wedding at no charge if you'll have me." The florist called to say she was adding extra arrangements free of charge. The caterer upgraded our menu without increasing the price. Everyone wanted to be part of our happy ending now that they knew the full story. But the most overwhelming response came from complete strangers. Messages poured in from people all over the country, all over the world, sharing their own stories of family scapegoating. Therapists reached out offering free sessions. Support group leaders invited me to share my story with their communities. Wedding vendors I'd never met from different states offered their services. Someone I didn't know started a GoFundMe without my permission to help cover costs from the sabotage, and it raised $12,000 before I even knew it existed. I immediately donated all of it to a charity that supported family estrangement survivors because I didn't need the money. What I needed was validation, and I was getting that in waves. A local news reporter named Mallory Grant reached out requesting an interview. After talking it over with Gabriel and Heidi, I agreed. The interview aired Tuesday evening, and I made sure to keep the focus on healing rather than revenge. "I just wanted people to know they're not alone," I told Mallory on camera. "If you've been scapegoated by your family, if you've been told you're too sensitive or too dramatic or making things up, I want you to know that your experience is real. You're not crazy, and you deserve people who show up for you." The interview clips were shared another 50,000 times. 2 weeks before my wedding, strangers were recognizing me in public. A woman in the grocery store approached me cautiously and said, "You're the wedding girl, aren't you? I just wanted to say good for you." My family did something similar, and I thought I was alone. "Thank you for speaking up." Another time, a man in the coffee shop paid for my order and said my sister went through something like this. "Your post helped her understand she wasn't the problem." These interactions were awkward and overwhelming, but also deeply moving. Gabriel watched it all with a mixture of pride and protectiveness. "The whole world showed up for you the way your family should have," he said one night as we read through messages. You built something better than blood. The only direct contact I received from my immediate family was a single text from Natalie on Wednesday. I didn't know they were doing all that. I'm sorry. It was too little, too late, and I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned completely, stay ash. There's no rebuilding from that much betrayal, that much complicity and cruelty. I deleted the text and moved forward with my life. The validation from thousands of strangers couldn't undo the pain my family had caused, but it did something equally important. It confirmed that I wasn't the problem. I had never been the problem. And now I could move forward without their voices in my head, without their version of me weighing down my future. I was free. Truly free, for the first time in my life. The wedding day arrived on a perfect October afternoon when autumn was at its peak glory. The leaves surrounding our barn venue glowed gold and crimson and orange. The air was crisp without being cold, and the sun sat in a clear blue sky like a blessing. I stood in the bridal suite with my bridesmaids, Gabriel's sisters Heidi and her younger sister Clara, my best friend Scarlett from work, and my college roommate Iris who'd flown in from California. We were laughing as we finished getting ready, and for the first time in months I felt purely happy, untainted by anxiety or fear. My dress was simple and elegant, exactly what I'd wanted, and as Heidi helped me with the final buttons I felt tears starting. That's when Dorothy, Gabriel's mother, knocked on the door. She was holding my bouquet, her eyes already wet with tears. "May I come in?" she asked, and I nodded because I couldn't speak. Dorothy set down the flowers and took both my hands in hers. "Juliet, I know I'm not your mother, and I would never presume to take that place. But honored beyond words to stand in for the mother you deserved. You are a gift to our family and we love you completely." I started crying then, careful not to ruin my makeup, and she pulled me into a hug that felt like everything a mother's hug should feel like. This, I realized, was what family should feel like. Safe, unconditional, real. The ceremony was everything I'd dreamed. I'd chosen to walk down the aisle alone, a decision that felt symbolic and powerful. I didn't need anyone to give me away, because I belonged to myself now. As I walked through the barn doors and saw 50 people standing to watch, every single one of them there because they genuinely cared, I felt a wave of gratitude so strong it nearly buckled my knees. And there, at the end of the aisle, was Gabriel, his eyes locked on mine with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Our officiant was Pastor Leo, a man who'd mentored Gabriel since childhood, and his presence made everything feel sacred and safe. The vows were personal and tearful. Gabriel spoke first, his voice thick with emotion. "Juliet, you taught me that family isn't where you come from, it's who shows up. You've shown up for everyone in your life with kindness and generosity even when you weren't getting it back. You taught me what real strength looks like. I promise to show up for you every single day for the rest of our lives. You'll never have to earn my love because it's already yours, completely and unconditionally." When it was my turn, I could barely speak through tears. "Gabriel, you showed up when everyone else walked away, and you stayed when they tried to tear us apart. You saw me when I felt invisible. You believed me when I thought I was crazy. You built a safe place when the world felt hostile. I promise to honor that gift every day. I promise to show up for you the way you've shown up for me. I promise to build a family with you based on truth and kindness and actual love." There wasn't a dry eye in the venue. I saw Dorothy crying into her husband's shoulder. I saw Scarlett wiping her face with tissues. I saw our friends from the painting class I'd taken, people who'd only known me for a year but had shown up anyway because that's what real relationships look like. The officiant pronounced us married and Gabriel kissed me while everyone cheered, and in that moment I felt so completely loved and seen that the pain of my biological family felt like it belonged to a different person, a different life. The reception was intimate and joyful. The food was incredible, the flowers were stunning, and the photography was beautiful. Gabriel's best man Holden gave a speech about watching his best friend fall in love with someone who made him better. Dorothy gave a toast that made everyone cry again. "Welcome to a family that will never make you earn love," she said, raising her glass. "A family that shows up, that tells the truth, that celebrates your joy instead of diminishing it." Scarlett spoke about watching me transform from broken to whole, from someone who apologized for existing to someone who took up space unapologetically. "You found yourself," she said. And then you found someone who loved exactly who you found. We danced to The Luckiest by Ben Folds, Gabriel holding me close and whispering you're my favorite person in the world. We cut a cake that tasted better than it looked. We laughed with friends and toasted with his family and celebrated being exactly who we were without performance or pretense. Late in the reception, Francine, the venue manager, approached with an envelope. "This was dropped off this morning," she said. "I verified it's safe to open." Inside was a card from Aunt Ramona with a check for $5,000. The note explained, "This is money from your grandmother's estate. She left it specifically for your wedding. Your parents kept it from you. I'm making sure you get it now. You deserved so much better, Juliet. Love, Ramona." I stood there holding evidence of yet another betrayal, another thing my parents had stolen from me, but instead of anger, I felt something like relief. Every lie they'd told was coming to light. Every manipulation was being exposed. The truth really did win eventually. Gabriel found me outside later when Id stepped away for air. I was looking through the window at our people celebrating. At the life we'd built, at the family we'd chosen. "Are you okay?" he asked, and I turned to him with complete honesty. "I'm better than okay. I'm free. No regrets?" he asked. "Not even one," I said. They tried to take everything from me. Instead, they showed me what I didn't need. Later that night, as we prepared to leave under a sparkler send-off, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. Being excluded from my sister's wedding had felt like the end of the world, but actually, it had been the beginning of my real life. It forced me to examine the family dynamics I'd accepted as normal. It pushed me to go no contact and heal. It led me to Gabriel and his family. It taught me what real love looks like. If my parents had included me in Natalie's wedding, I might have stayed trapped in that dysfunction for years longer, still trying to earn love that was never going to come. Their rejection was the greatest gift they never meant to give me. The lesson I learned through all of this is complex but crucial. Being excluded from my sister's wedding hurt deeply, but I learned that being included in the wrong rooms means nothing. It's better to be excluded from toxicity than included in trauma. Blood doesn't make family, showing up does. I have 50 people who chose me, who showed up, who stayed through the mess. That's 50 more than the family who shared my DNA. My wedding guest list went viral not because it was exclusive, but because it was intentional. Every single person earned their place by being kind, consistent, and real. I didn't expose my family for revenge. I exposed them for freedom. The truth doesn't need defense, it just needs daylight. And once the truth was out, it resonated with thousands of people who'd experienced similar abuse. That told me something important. I wasn't alone. None of us are alone. There are countless people being scapegoated, being gaslit, being told they're the problem when actually they're just in a system that requires a scapegoat to function. Healing isn't about making peace with people who hurt you. Sometimes it's about making peace with the fact that they'll never change and that you don't need them to. I spent 32 years thinking I wasn't enough, that if I just gave more, or loved better, or tried harder, my family would finally see my worth. Then I realized I was always enough. They were just empty. They had nothing to give, because they'd never done the internal work to become whole people. They operated from a place of ego and image and control, and anyone who threatened that image had to be destroyed. I threatened it by being authentic, by refusing to perform, by eventually walking away, and they tried to destroy me for it. But here's what they didn't anticipate. I built a life so beautiful that their rejection ended up feeling like protection. I threw a wedding with a small guest list and it went viral because people recognized real love when they saw it. Quality over quantity, truth over blood, chosen family over obligation. My parents excluded me from my sister's wedding, and in return, I excluded toxicity from my life. And am happier than I ever thought possible. If you're the scapegoat in your family, I want you to hear this. You're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're not the problem. You're just in a sick system that needs someone to blame. One day you'll build a life so authentic that their rejection will feel like freedom. You'll celebrate something, maybe a wedding or a birthday or just a random Tuesday, and your guest list will be small but mighty. You'll look around and realize every single person there chose you, and you chose them back. That's what real family looks like. My wedding guest list went viral because it represented something people are hungry for: authenticity, boundaries, the courage to walk away from blood relatives who act like strangers and embrace strangers who act like family. It resonated because so many people are trapped in family systems that hurt them, too afraid to leave, too conditioned to believe they're the problem. My story gave them permission to consider another option. You can leave, you can build something better. You can be happy without them. As Gabriel and I drove away from our wedding under a cascade of sparklers, I looked back one final time at the barn, glowing with lights and love. I saw my people cheering and celebrating, people who'd shown up for me when it mattered. Then I turned forward in my seat, smiled at my husband, and never looked back again. The past was finally past. The future was wide open. And I was free. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been the scapegoat in your family? Have you experienced that moment when you realized the problem wasn't you? Drop your story in the comments because this community is built on shared experiences and mutual support. And if this story resonated with you, if it helped you feel less alone or gave you courage to set your own boundaries, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because we share real stories about real struggles, and your support helps these stories reach people who need them. Share this video with anyone who might be going through something similar, because sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step toward healing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of a community that chooses authenticity over performance, truth over image, and real love over obligation. I hope you find your people, your chosen family, your safe place. And I hope you build a life so beautiful that anyone who rejected you realizes too late what they lost. You deserve that. You deserve everything. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.